Alrighty, so as promised, I am going to do the reaction in terms of the World Cup draw that happened this morning. And by the way, I actually did not watch the World Cup draw this morning because it took place around 9 in the morning. And I feel like, there really isn't any need for me to have to wake up in the morning to watch the World Cup draw live because, I will later find out exactly which team belongs in which group after that and that. In terms of the World Cup draw itself, I heard that it actually took a long time. I mean, it took almost an hour and a half before the whole procedure is finished, and part of that is that they had the opening ceremony, talk about Qatar being the host and all those shenanigans before they actually got to the draw, which that alone I think took like about 20 to 30 minutes for all those people that basically picked the balls from the box and determine which team is belong in which group and so forth and so forth. But after all the process is done, this is exactly how the group stage is going to look, and we now know all 32 teams that's going to be going to the World Cup in November of where exactly which group that they're going to be. And in this video, not only I'll react in terms of talk about each of these groups, I'll also talk about notable MLS player that is involved in the World Cup, because it's not just there's going to be some notable player that represent the U.S. and Canada. There's actually a lot of MLS player that's going to be representing their country in the World Cup this year. And I'll also kind of talk about, which exactly is the group of death. Which, to me, when I look at all the groups and the way that this World Cup is going to be, there really isn't a group of death. I mean, you could maybe, or I mean, there are some group you could argue could be the group of death, and especially, there are still some World Cup qualifying that is still needs to be decided, and there are, I think, still 3 more spot up for grabs in terms of these teams going to Qatar in the World Cup. Yeah, it's going to, things could definitely change in terms of how the groups is going to be, and that include the U.S., which they also draw in a group where the final team in their group is still yet to be decided. But let us start with Group A, which we got the host Qatar being in Group A, followed by the Netherlands, Senegal, and Ecuador. This is probably a group that I think out of all the group that is not involved, the U.S. and Canada, that there's a lot of MLS players that is in this group, and specifically a lot of them come from Ecuador, where the notable player like Jose Cifuentes, Diego Palacio, and even Xavier Arriaga could potentially be in the Ecuadorian national team. But when you look at this group, I think it's pretty obvious that I think the Netherlands is going to top that group. I mean, I will say that Qatar could be a dark horse, and one thing we know about teams that have hosted the World Cup is that most of the time they do get through the knockout stage. Like, the only time I remember going all the way back to when I first started watching the World Cup in 2010, I think South Africa is still the only team to have not made it to the knockout round that hosted the World Cup. Because I know last year, well, not last year, but back in 2018, Russia made it to the quarterfinal. Previous year, Brazil made it all the way to the semifinal, and then we know what happened when they made it to the semifinal against Germany. As mentioned, 2010 South Africa didn't make it, though they actually got a very high points total in their group. They even, I think, if I remember from South Africa, they actually beat France in that group, and yet they still weren't able to go through into the next round. And of course, 2006 Germany were able to move on, and then in 2002, same thing, South Korea able to go all the way into the semifinals. So historically, teams that hosted the World Cup, they have done well in terms of making to the knockout stage. And a couple of years ago, when I heard Qatar, of course, was hosting the World Cup, I was thinking this might be one of those rare cases that, yeah, the host country is not going to do well in the World Cup. But with the way that Qatar just won the AFC Cup, or the Asian Cup, just a couple of years ago, this team is not a joke. I mean, this team is actually a decent team, and could definitely be a surprise in terms of the way that they get home field advantage and have their fans backing them to really do well in this tournament. So yeah, don't be surprised that they could not only go for the knockout round, but maybe they could go far in this tournament too. And then we get to Group B, and this is the group that pretty much everybody's been talking about, because the U.S., of course, is involved in, and I would like to say that this group is kind of the geopolitical group, because I guarantee you that, I really don't want to kind of just talk about politics in this channel, but it is really hard to not talk about that subject when you look at what happened in Group B, of how there is so many geopolitical kind of context in that, and also some historic context too. First of all, I got a dream kind of scenario where England and the US were in the same group, so that means I get a Blues not Derby in the World Cup, because I do support England. I have family member that lives there, and even some ancestry that lives and born in England before. And not to mention, when the US did not make it to the World Cup in 2018, England was the team that I support heavily to hopefully go all the way, and they came so close, unfortunately losing to Croatia in the semifinals. So that should be very interesting to see kind of like a Blues not Derby in the World Cup. But obviously the other big talking point is that Iran is in the same group of the US, and boy oh boy, I wonder when the US play against Iran. And I know there could be a case where Joe Biden would actually attend this World Cup. I mean, I know that he has attended previous World Cup, most notably in Brazil, where he actually did attend the World Cup. I'm pretty sure he's going to be there, and I'm not sure if the president or the prime minister of Iran is also going to be there too, because if that's the case, oh boy, this is going to be tense. And it's I don't know if they might need to be separated, because the tension between the US and Iran in terms of the political part. But what's even more geopolitical than that is that there could be an opportunity that Ukraine could be in this group too. I mean, right now, there's Wales, Scotland, and Ukraine, of course, vying for the last spot in Group B. And if there's a case where Iran take on Ukraine, and especially, we know the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and Iran is one of the few countries that actually support the invasion. Yeah, that would be very awkward, and I bet there's going to be more talking point about that than the actual game that is going to be taking place. But overall, when you look at this group for the US, I mean, it's not the most difficult group, I would say, and I would also say it's also not the easiest group, because I feel like England is the favorites to top this group, and that for the US, if they can get points in their first game, which they're going to either play against Wales, Scotland, and Ukraine, they always get a huge chance of moving on. I heard there was a stat line saying that 78% of the team that wins the opening game, they do move on into the knockout round. So the first game, whether they play against Wales, Scotland, or Ukraine, that's would definitely feel like it's a must win. I mean, out of all three of these teams, ideally you would hope that the US gets Scotland. I mean, Scotland is definitely a team that shouldn't take any joke in it, especially we saw what they did in the Euros and able to they didn't make it to the knockout stage, but when in terms of playing against big teams, they can definitely pull off a surprise. And I definitely know when they play against England and they got a 0-0 draw in that one. And then of course Wales, depending on if Gareth Bale is still be part of the national team, they also have some decent player in their roster. And then Ukraine is another team that also have some very notable player in there. So I just feel like out of those three, it's not going to be easy. But if there is the team that I would want to face, if the US are going to be playing them in the first game, is probably going to be Scotland. But like I said, we'll see which team that is, and I believe they're not going to find out until at the earliest in June, because I think in the UEFA World Cup qualifying, I believe both Scotland and Ukraine, of course, are playing against each other, and the winner of that will be playing against Wales and have a opportunity to get into the World Cup and pretty much complete Group B. So a lot can change in terms of how we view this, and that again, this should be an interesting group, and that I do think that the US are going to move on. Though another opponent that I will say that the US got to be careful is Iran, because one thing I know about Iran, and if you're kind of a US fans that of course watch the US all the way back in the late 90s, is that the US and Iran was also in the same group in the 98 World Cup, and it did not go well for the US when they play against Iran. And especially Iran is also a team that is considered to be the best team in the Asian qualifier, and that this is also a team that I know when I watched that 2018 World Cup when they were in, this is a very good defensive team. And if there's one thing I know about the US, is that, yeah, I mean, they're not always the best in terms of trying to break down a team that likes to bunker and trying to play very defensively. So this is going to be interesting to see when they do play against Iran. Though the good thing is that that is not going to be until the last game. Though the bad thing is that could also be a decider of whether or not if the U.S. are going to move on into the knockout stage. Then we got Group C, and Group C we got Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. So I'm pretty sure all U.S. fans were hoping that Mexico does get into a tough group, and in some way they are. I mean, if you not include Saudi Arabia, there's going to be a three-way fight for those two spots with Argentina, Mexico, and Poland, and it's going to be interesting to see when Messi take on Mexico in the group stage, but also in terms of Poland itself. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention in Group B, notable MLS players, especially from the U.S. You got Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson, and then of course in Group C, if you want to know notable MLS player from Mexico, obviously you got Julian Araujo, maybe Efrain Alvarez could be part of this team, but the big name that maybe could be part of this team is Chicharito, though. Again, there seems to be a beef between Tata and Chicharito, and even though I know a lot of Mexican fans want Chicharito to be back in this team, I don't know if that's going to, of course, be the case. But no, in some way they probably would want to, because Chicharito is still their all-time goal scorer, and it just feels like they really miss his presence in the World Cup qualifying, and they are going to be able to face against the best team like Argentina and Poland. They probably might need to have Chicharito in that start. I mean, not saying that they don't have good attacking talent too. I mean, they got Raul Jimenez and also Chucky Lozano. But if you had Chicharito there, then it definitely gives a much more dynamic to this Mexican attack. And also, when you look at Poland, I mean, everybody talks about Lewandowski, but let's also not forget some of these MLS strikers that could be part of the Polish national team. Guys like Adam Buksa and Karol Świdecki, which, by the way, what's interesting about the Świdecki situation is that, remember how I said that, the MLS league website lied about Świdecki joining Poland, and technically that was not the case? Well, actually, the website was not wrong. The fact that Świdecki was called up by Poland, he actually did get called up by the national team, but then it seemed like he had some medical issue, and it seems like he had some hamstring issue, and therefore that's why he rejected that move. Or actually, I think Charlotte basically, the medical team basically asked the Polish national team to not call him up because of this hamstring injury. Though, again, looking how Świdecki played in that game against FC Cincinnati, I doubt that Świdecki actually had a hamstring injury. I think that's basically Charlotte just using an excuse and saying, yeah, he's our most important asset, and we're going to come up with any excuse to make sure he doesn't go to join the national team during the international break when we still have a game during that point. Though, again, I don't know if Świdecki is happy about this, though. You know that he's definitely going to work hard, and he's already shown that he is a man on a mission to not only be the main number 9 for the Charlotte team, but also able to join the Polish national team in the World Cup. But now moving on into Group D, and in Group D we got France, Denmark, Tunisia, and then we got Peru, Australia, or the UAE as the possible team that finish up this group. I believe Australia and the UAE is playing in a Asian World Cup qualifier to determine who is going to be playing an intercontinental kind of playoffs against Peru. But there's really not a lot of MLS player that is notable in this group except for Peru. You got Raul Ruidíaz, who I'm not sure if he's going to be the main man for this Peruvian national team, especially going forward, because I haven't heard a lot about Paulo Guerrero and how there could be a case that he could actually be part of this Peruvian team, despite the fact that he's like 38 years old now. But if Ruidíaz is going to be in this Peru team, there could be a case that it's going to have a lot of people, especially Sounders fans, definitely will be cheering Peru and cheering on Ruidíaz to do well with the team. But other than that, when you look at this group, obviously France is the heavy favorites. They're the reigning World Cup winner, and they already look like a team that is looking to defend their crown. But don't forget about Denmark too. Denmark is definitely a decent team too. Tunisia can also throw a bit of a surprise, though. They did kind of had a disappointing African Cup of Nations. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to how this group is gonna be. Before we now get into Group E, and I said before how if there is a group of death out of this World Cup group stage game, I think Group E is probably the group of death with the way that you got Germany, Spain, Japan, or Costa Rica and New Zealand playing in that international national or intercontinental kind of playoffs, and especially if Costa Rica is able to beat New Zealand, you could have a group that is Germany, Spain, Japan, and Costa Rica, and that could be a very, very tough group. I mean, obviously Germany and Spain are going to be the two teams that most likely is going to qualify, but don't forget about Japan. They can definitely cause some surprises, and they've always known as the team that has consistently been the best team coming out of Asia. And then Costa Rica, if their form from the World Cup qualifying can continue into the World Cup, and especially we know Costa Rica has done well in the World Cup before, and anytime we have Keylor Navas in goal, you know that you're going to do well in that. Yeah, I think this might be the toughest group out of all of them, although you could even argue about the next group that I'm going to talk about, and also notable MLS player from Group E, mostly come from Costa Rica. You got guys like Francisco Calvo that is part of the Costa Rican team, and even if you want to talk about former MLS player, you got Kendall Waston being part of the Costa Rican team. But going to Group F, we talk about how this could also be the group of death because this is the group that Canada, of course, is involved in. Coming into the World Cup draw, there was always a lot of talk the fact that Canada was going to be in the group of death, and that this one kind of seems like it. Though I will say that it could have been a lot worse in my opinion, because while Canada does get paired up with Belgium, who is another team that is favorites to win the World Cup, they got Croatia and Morocco in the same group. Croatia is a team that I've heard that it started to age a little bit. I mean, that golden generation that they had, and them making all the way to the World Cup final back in 2018 is still there, but it is starting to kind of age a little bit. And Morocco is a team that could also be a threat in the World Cup. I mean, one of the most notable player I know from Morocco is Hakim Ziyech, who played for Chelsea. But they're a team that could cause a bit of surprise too. But there's no doubt that despite the fact that Canada kind of been in a tough group, it's not as tough as they thought that they would be. And I think with this Canadian national team, especially from what we saw during the CONCACAF World Cup qualifier, this team can have a shot. Like they have some talent both in the defense, in the midfield, and also in the attack. And I can't wait to see how guys like Alphonso Davies, Kyle Larin, and Jonathan David is going to go up against some of these well-known teams like Belgium, like Croatia, and also against Morocco. But yeah, we'll see if Canada can of course qualify. Obviously the heavy favorites in this one is going to be Belgium and Croatia, but there could be a case that Canada could surprise everyone in that. I think from what I've also heard is that Canada, a team that was in pot 4, that was the team that everybody kind of mentioned how they do not want to draw that team in a group out of pot 4, because that was probably the strongest team out of pot 4. Now, in terms of notable MLS player out of that group, I mean, mostly from the Canadian national team, you got Alistair Johnston and Mark Anthony Kaye that is coming out of that group. But now going into Group G, we got Brazil, Switzerland, Serbia, and Cameroon. Obviously, Brazil is going to be the heavy favorites because they're actually ranked number 1 in the FIFA rankings. But don't be surprised that Switzerland can create some surprise. Obviously, Xherdan Shaqiri is going to be part of this team, and he of course have done well before with the Swiss national team, especially in the World Cup. Serbia could also be a surprise too. They're definitely an up and coming team that can definitely do something. And then Cameroon, we know that if you're a Sounders fan, if there's one thing that can immediately come up in their mind is that get ready to see Nuhu in the World Cup. I mean, I don't know if Nuhu will still be a Sounders player once he goes to Cameroon, but if he does perform well, then there is no doubt the Sounders are going to make some heavy investment for that Nuhu sell. And I know it will suck the fact that Nuhu eventually will move on for the Sounders, but with his talent that he of course has, there's no doubt that he's going to be eventually moving on to a bigger club in Europe, and the Sounders are going to get a heavy sum of money. And if there's also one thing I know about the World Cup is that this is not only a chance for their team to these players to represent their country, but a chance to kind of perform well in the World Cup and get a lot of these European team noticed that they want to, of course, get him because of how well they perform in it. So it could be an opportunity, like I said, for a lot of these players. And again, as I said with Nuhu, if he does well with Cameroon, this is going to be a guy that is going to be sold off for a huge sum of money heading into the next off season. And then finally, when you look at Group H, we got Portugal, Uruguay, South Korea, and Ghana in the group. Portugal obviously is going to be the favorites alongside with Uruguay. But I would say that, what's interesting about this group is that everybody's looking forward to that Uruguay versus Ghana match. I mean, we know what happened back in 2010 and the whole Luis Suarez handball situation. And that a lot of those Ghanese players, which, a lot of them weren't part of that 2010 World Cup team, but they have not forgotten about that and how they're still very upset about that controversial moment. So that's going to be interesting to see. And then, of course, Portugal. This is going to be the last time we're going to see Ronaldo playing for this team. I mean, he has started to get up to that age. And really, speaking of Ronaldo and Messi, we almost start to see the end of the era of their dominance, because these two players, they are start to get into their mid-30s, and as much as they have defeat Father Time for so long now, especially in the last couple of years where they're still in the top of the game, I feel like this is the season where we finally started to see Father Time start to catch up to him, especially with Messi not doing well with PSG, and then Ronaldo. He's doing okay with Man U, but still not at a level where you would have remember him during the peak of his power when he was with Real Madrid for a very long time. So yeah, this could be the last time we might see both Ronaldo and Messi representing their national team in this World Cup, and we'll see how well they're gonna do. But again, notable MLS player coming out of this group. Obviously, a lot coming from Uruguay. You got Brian Rodriguez, and then Facundo Torres and Cesar Araujo from Orlando City. And even for Ghana, you got Jonathan Mensah, and then Ubo, the two Columbus Crew player that most likely could be representing the Ghanaian national team heading into this World Cup. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my recap in terms of the World Cup. And like I said, we're still a long way before the World Cup begins. A lot could change in terms, it's easy right now to kind of predict who is going to move on into the knockout stage. But since, there's still a lot that could be changed, and that maybe some of these national team can hit into good form, or maybe they will head into the World Cup not in the best form. It can really change how things, of course, would look. Which is why, as much as I also said that there is teams that's going to be the favorites coming out of this, it could change. It could change as we get closer to the World Cup, which is why, it's also, I love to hear a lot of the hot takes right now in terms of the group, and how people are upset about some of the group, or either some teams are happy with the group that they're in, or in some cases people are going to say that the draw, of course, is rigged, which, I feel like anytime when there is a draw, there is always going to be people saying that the draw, of course, is rigged. And especially looking at the group that the U.S. are in, people are saying that, yeah, that's, today, of course, is April 1st, and it's kind of an April Fool's joke. I think if there is a group that basically cement today in terms of being the April Fool's kind of a group, it has to be Group B, with the way that there's just so much story kind of rivalry, and also some geopolitical rivalry that is going on in that group. But either way, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all the teams in these group, and let me know in the comments below what's your reaction in terms of the World Cup draw that happened this morning. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.